I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just stood in the doorway, holding a paper bag of groceries, paid for by me, as usual, while my mother called me ungrateful. Her name is Nancy Monroe, even when she's calm, her words cut like glass, but that day, she wasn't calm. "You're ungrateful," she snapped, louder than the soft hum of the fridge. "Get out, and don't come back." Behind her, my father, Daniel Monroe, leaned against the counter. He didn't speak, didn't look at me, just rubbed the bridge of his nose, like my presence was an inconvenience. Eli, my little brother by 3 years, didn't flinch from the couch, still in sweatpants at 3 p.m., glued to his phone, like none of this concerned him. It was Sunday. I had come straight from work, arms full of the same essentials they always forgot: bread, eggs, milk. I brought them every week, quietly, predictably, like clockwork, like I was invisible until they ran out of milk again. I glanced around the living room one last time, the same carpet I'd vacuumed since high school, the dent on the wall where Eli broke a picture frame and blamed the wind, and I thought, so this is what it takes to finally not be needed. So, I left. No one followed, not even my father, not even the boy I once protected like a shadow. I moved out when I was 17, not because I hated them, not then, but because I knew I wouldn't survive if I stayed. They loved to say they raised me right, but what they meant was that I raised myself, quietly, so they wouldn't have to. We weren't destitute, but everything always teetered on the edge. Bills were late, food ran low, lights flickered, not from storms, but from unpaid invoices. I got my first job this summer after 10th grade at the diner on Route 18, started as a hostess, filled in as a busser, became a server. Even when I wasn't old enough to carry alcohol, no one asked, no one offered help. My parents never drove me, never picked me up, but they sure sighed when I labeled my tip jar college. By senior year, I was pulling double shifts and doing homework at 2 a.m. I still graduated with honors, still earned a full ride to state. No one came to orientation, no one helped me move in. I rented a U-Haul and drove myself. That was our dynamic. I handled things. They let me. Eli was different. Always had been. He was the baby, their words, not mine. Every sniffle was treated like a crisis, every bad grade blamed on teachers or phantom diagnoses. He dropped out of community college twice, quit 4 jobs in 1 year, moved back home at 24 just to reset, and never left. Still, they called him special, said he was just taking his time, figuring it out. No one asked what I was figuring out. I was too busy keeping the lights on. The first time Mom mentioned the mortgage, she didn't say the word help, just, "Your dad and I are stretched thin this month." That was 2 years ago. At first, I pitched in: gas, groceries, the water bill, then the electric, then the mortgage. The numbers grew, their gratitude shrank. I don't remember when I started covering the full amount. There was no conversation, just silence on their end, and a recurring transfer on mine. Eli once joked that I'd become the family's safety net. I laughed, but it stuck in my throat, because I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a direct deposit. And still, when I came through that door last Sunday with groceries, they looked at me like a thief, like I was taking, not giving. It's strange how people forget where the help comes from once they believe they're entitled to it. My new apartment isn't much, 1 bedroom, creaky heater, thin walls, but it's mine. I painted the cabinets sky blue, planted something green in the windowsill. I water it most days. There's no yelling here, no bitter sighs, no overdue bills folded into threats. Just peace. Just me. For the first time in years, I could breathe. Not that shallow kind of breath you take while waiting for someone to need something, real breath, full, deep, nothing hanging over me, no imaginary clock ticking down to the next crisis. I slept through the night, cooked for 1, watched trash TV, left the dishes in the sink just because I could. And you know what? No one said a word, no calls, no voicemails, not even a text from Eli. The silence wasn't loud, it was peaceful, like I'd finally stepped outside of a life I never truly belonged to. I wasn't expecting anyone to check in, but a part of me still thought someone might ask if I was okay. They didn't. Then, 3 months later, on a Tuesday I barely remember, my phone lit up, a message from my father. "Why haven't you sent the mortgage this month?" I stared at the screen, not angry, not even surprised, just hollow, like someone had knocked on a door I'd locked and walked away from. Of course, I thought. It was never really about me. It was always about the house. I didn't respond, just flipped the phone face down on the table and poured myself a cup of coffee. No music, no distractions, just that message pulsing in the background like a mosquito I didn't bother to swat. An hour passed, then another. When I finally looked again, there were 5 more messages. 3 from my mom, 1 from Eli, another from Dad. Claire, the bank called. We're behind. How could you do this to us? You know we don't have that kind of money. And Eli, of course. Are you seriously going to let them lose the house just to prove a point? There it was. The guilt, right on time. Not one of them asked how I was. Not one of them said, "We miss you." Not one of them remembered that they told me, word for word, "Don't bother coming back." They didn't want me. They wanted my help. There's a difference. It felt like cold air creeping under the door of a house that used to be warm. I let another hour go by. Then I responded, 1 line. I thought I wasn't welcome anymore. And just like that, it started. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Texts, calls, voicemails, like a dam had burst. Suddenly, my absence was a crisis. Suddenly, I mattered again. But not as a daughter. No, as the person who always fixed everything, and now, refused to. They didn't stop. That night, I turned off notifications, but the phone kept lighting up like a fire alarm no one else could silence. Claire, answer your father, he's worried sick. We raised you better than this. You're being spiteful. Spite. That one landed hard. Not sacrifice. Not support. Not a decade of shouldering burdens without complaint. Just spite. As if I was punishing them for something they never acknowledged doing. At midnight, Eli called. I let it ring. Then came the voicemail. Claire, come on, this is serious, they're freaking out, the bank's involved, you need to fix this. Fix this. As if I had broken something. As if I wasn't the one who held it all together. I played it twice. Then deleted it. The next morning, more texts. From Mom, this is tearing the family apart. From Dad, what kind of daughter does this to her parents? That one made me laugh, dry, hollow. Because I knew exactly what kind. The kind of daughter who paid your mortgage while you told your friends your son was in between jobs. The kind who skipped her own dentist appointments to keep your water running. The kind you cast out the moment she said no. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I waited. Until the sun was fully up. Until my coffee had cooled. Until the notifications on my phone stopped sounding like family and started sounding like noise. Then I replied, calm, final. Not my problem anymore. And for once, when the phone lit up again, I didn't flinch. Because I finally understood. I wasn't being cruel. I was just done. For a while, I convinced myself silence was peace. That not knowing was better than confirmation. That maybe they'd learned something, changed, reflected. But even silence has weight. It creeps in during quiet moments and asks questions you're not ready to answer. And eventually, it asked me the one I couldn't ignore. Where did the money go? I had sent it, every month, on time, without fail. For groceries, for bills, for the mortgage. They never said thank you. But they never said stop, either. And I never asked for proof. Maybe that was my mistake. So one morning, I did what I should have done a long time ago. I called the bank, not to confront, just to ask. A woman answered, calm, professional, her voice warm with Midwestern kindness. She asked for the mortgage account number, some security info, then put me on a brief hold. When she came back, her tone shifted. It looks like the account has been delinquent since your payment stopped about 7 months ago. I blinked. Sorry, delinquent? Yes, ma'am, the automatic payments from your account were removed. We haven't received anything from that source since. I thanked her, almost afraid to hear if the payments had been made another way. There was another pause. There have been some partial payments, but the account is now flagged. It's in pre-foreclosure status. I don't remember much after hanging up. I know I stood in the kitchen for what felt like forever, phone in hand, heart heavy, not racing, just still. The kind of stillness that follows betrayal, quiet, final. I opened my banking app and scrolled, payment after payment, month after month, thousands of dollars, labeled home, utilities, family support. But if the mortgage hadn't been paid, where had it gone? What had they done with it? I thought back to the new recliner in the living room, The smart TV that showed up on sale. The groceries that always seemed better stocked when I visited. I never asked. I never questioned. I just gave. And they took. I don't think it was malice at first, but somewhere along the way, they stopped seeing it as help and started seeing it as something they were entitled to. I didn't call them out of anger. I called because I was done guessing. And after years of silence, what you get in return isn't always truth, but it's often clarity. I started with Eli. He picked up quickly, like he'd been waiting for me to cave. His voice rushed, defensive, emotional. He said Mom hadn't slept, that Dad had gone quiet, that the bank had called again. He made it sound like I'd set fire to the family home and walked away. But none of his words reached me, not really, because underneath all the panic, I heard the tone I knew well, guilt disguised as urgency. I waited for him to finish, then asked, calm but sharp, what happened to the money I sent every month? Silence stretched on the other end, not technical silence, emotional silence, the kind where someone scrambles for a version of the truth that doesn't make them look worse than they already feel. He said they used it for groceries, repairs, things that came up, like I was unreasonable for asking, but I'd lived there. I knew the mortgage size. I knew what 7 months of unpaid bills looked like. So I asked again, not louder but sharper, you knew they weren't paying the mortgage, didn't you? He didn't answer directly. He didn't have to. If he'd truly been in the dark, he would have been shocked, upset, defensive in a different way, but instead, he sighed, that same tired, empty sigh he used when he was caught, like when he skipped class or lied about job interviews, a sigh that said, yeah, and I hoped you'd never ask. I thanked him, not out of kindness, but out of finality, and hung up. Later that night, my phone rang again. It was Mom. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. I picked up. Her voice was tight, the forced calm she used when she knew she was in the wrong but would never say it aloud. She said I had embarrassed them by calling the bank, that I was making everything worse, that families don't handle things like this. And for the first time in a long time, I let her talk. I wanted to hear how far she'd go to avoid saying, we lied to you. Eventually, Dad took the phone. His voice was soft, almost pleading. He didn't ask how I was, didn't ask why I was upset. He just asked if I'd help them catch up, just this once, just until they figured something out. In that moment, I understood something clearly. They weren't sorry, they were scared, and scared people don't apologize, they negotiate. So I told him, without hesitation, sell the house. There was a pause, then disbelief, 2 voices, layered in shock. You don't mean that, this is still your home. But it wasn't, and maybe it never had been. The next morning, I woke to a wall of notifications, texts, voicemails, missed calls, some desperate, some angry, a few pretending to be calm. I didn't open any of them. I already knew what they would say, that I was cruel, that I was heartless, that I'd turned my back on family, but I hadn't. They turned their backs the moment I stopped being useful. I made a fresh cup of coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and watched the steam curl upward while the phone buzzed across the counter like it was shaking with guilt I refused to carry. Then I opened our old group chat, the one we used to plan birthdays, share reminders, coordinate grocery lists I always ended up paying for. I didn't say anything. I didn't make a dramatic exit. I just changed the group name from family to closed account, muted it, archived it, and then deleted their numbers. Not in anger, not in sadness, but in clarity, because when someone shows you that your presence only matters when tied to what you give, the most generous thing you can do is leave. On my counter, there was a white envelope, still sealed, my name written in my mother's handwriting. She must have dropped it off the day they still thought I'd come back. I held it, thought about opening it, then dropped it in the trash. No drama, no message, just paper letting go. And in that moment, with no one watching, no one clinging, no one calling me selfish, I felt something I hadn't in years. Weightless. I didn't leave because I stopped loving them. I left because they only loved the version of me that kept paying the bills and never asked questions. And when that version stopped showing up, so did their idea of family. Some people hear that and think it's cold, but there's nothing cold about protecting the parts of yourself no one else bothered to care for. I don't need them to understand. I just need them to stop pretending they ever saw me at all, because I was there every day, every month, until I wasn't. And now, they can finally feel the silence they spent years pretending wasn't mine. If you've ever stayed too long in a place that only wanted what you could give, just leave, that's all. You don't need to explain. Some of us already understand.